The following program, Live and Learn, is made possible by Aging Partners. Find out more on their website.
Hi everybody, welcome to Live and Learn. I'm Kim Hachia. On my segment today, we're going to be talking about a very interesting new app for your phone. It's called MyLink, and we're going to be talking about how that's a simple one-stop shop to help people find all sorts of social services and other things that are going on in Lincoln. Stay with me, I think you're going to want to see this.
Please stay tuned for a Titanic discussion. I kid you not. I'm Kristen Stows, and my guest, Cheryl Wrinkle, has turned her passion and fascination for the history of the Titanic into her lifelong study and career. I guarantee you will be fascinated as well. Stay with us.
Welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renaud. Today we have a very special treat for you. One of the prettiest places in the city of Lincoln is the Sunken Garden, and we're going to give you a little tour to show you some of the very cool new things that are here and available. Park horticulturalist Steve Nozzle will be here and give us that tour. You don't want to miss it.
I'm Doug Joes. Living with grief is part of the human experience. Today I'm going to visit with Sharon Duffy from Madonna Proactive. She will visit with us and discuss how to live for tomorrow and overcome that grief. Stay tuned for this informative and uplifting discussion.
This and more on today's Live and Learn.
Hi everybody, my name's Kim Hachia. Welcome to Live and Learn. It's really my pleasure today to welcome my guest Brian Seck, and we're going to talk about this really cool app project that's called MyLink. And it's a cool way for people to find information kind of at a one-stop shop situation on more than 400 social service nonprofit agencies in Lincoln. So thanks for coming, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. Give me sort of an elevator description of MyLink, which I understand was originally supposed to be pronounced MyLNK.
Right. So it's called MyLink, and the LNK is from the airport code. But we really thought that was kind of a nice combination of this is your link to services. So in a previous life, I was the homeless outreach coordinator for Lincoln Public Schools, and there were two very large resource books that were printed, put together by DHHS and our friends at the Center for People in Need, and I carried these around everywhere working with families. And I always thought, like, if we could make this into an app, how cool would that be? So that's really where the idea came from.
And so then, how did it get to be an app?
Sure. So I had the privilege to be a part of Leadership Lincoln Fellows Class 32, which is obviously the best class ever. And for Leadership Lincoln, you do service projects. And so I have this wonderful group of 9 people, and we kicked around different ideas, and we landed on developing this app as our service project.
So what does the app do?
Sure. So what the app does is it's a directory of the 450 nonprofit organizations here in Lincoln. So I used to work with homeless families each and every day. And when I worked with a single mom who had run out of diapers, she maybe knew of 1 place to get diapers. In reality, there's about 6 places where she could get free diapers, and she didn't know that. So the way that the app works is that you can search by category. Mm-hmm. So if you click on category, it'll show you all the different types of services that families can need. Excuse me.
So we're doing that right now.
Right. So for example, if a woman is experiencing domestic violence, there's the domestic violence category. She can click on that, and it shows all the different organizations that work on domestic violence. So here you can see the Child Advocacy Center, which works with kids who are being physically or sexually abused. So she could learn about that service if that's something that's necessary. You can also see the demographic information. Then if you go back to the home button or click go back, now you're back at the front page, one more to go back. Personally, my favorite part is the calendar. So if you click on calendar, I used to work with families every day who were food insecure. These are families who maybe run out of food stamps by the end of the month. Maybe the kids who are part of this family, maybe they just get fed at school. However, in Lincoln, there is at least 15 different places to get free food 7 days a week. The challenge is sometimes families, seniors, veterans don't know where the food is. This takes care of that. So here's today, Friday, June 21st. It lists the free places to get medical care today. So if you scroll back to the top, you'll see that there's free dental services today over at the Mission, but there's also all of these places where you can get free food all over town. And if you swipe on the blue area left to change the day, there's Saturday, you can swipe again, there's Sunday.
Wow,
so
that's
it's
really cool.
amazing that families, they don't have to worry about, do I have my directory, do I have that piece of paper? If they have their phone, they know where they can get free food and free services.
And I know you and I chatted earlier that there's been about 8,000 downloads
Yeah.
since February 2018.
So we released the app on February of 2018, thanks to our friends at Don't Panic Labs, which is a software development company right here in the Haymarket in Lincoln. And they developed the app using their high school and college interns, which is completely amazing. We've had about 8,000 downloads, and we're right in between 12 to 1,400 monthly users. So, a lot of times people download an app and never use it.
Right.
We know that people are very consistently using it, and it's really about 50-50. It's about 50% people who are case managers. A guy like me who used to work with homeless families, I'm using the app for families. And it's about 50% families in need who are utilizing the services. One really great thing about the app is that it's anonymous. So when we went around the community, and we really asked all the nonprofits in our community, like, do we need this? Is this a service that would be useful for you? The domestic violence agencies really pointed out to us that this has to be anonymous. So if you're looking at the app, there's no account feature. There's no briansec@gmail, my link account name.
Mm-hmm.
So when people are using this, it has no memory. As soon as you hit back or home, it's gone. And that's because if there's an abusive partner, he or she can't see what the other person's looking at.
That's really interesting. I find it interesting that you actually worked with the agencies rather than saying, we've done this thing for you.
Right.
It has become more of a, we have done this thing together.
Right.
And I think that probably has increased the buy-in. And where agencies, did they think, oh, great idea, but how much work is it for me?
Sure. So when we first started this project, Department of Health and Human Services had their community response guide, and the Center for People in Need had their community resource handbook. Really what we did is we put those two together. So DHHS no longer updates their community response handbook. This is the community response handbook. For the Center for People in Need, when there is a request put in by the agencies to update their information, that request goes to the Center for People in Need. So this did not reinvent the wheel, this merged the wheel. So it's really exciting that this is not any new energy, it's not any new asks. In fact, agencies get asked less than they used to update their information. One great thing about the app, if there's any agencies who are watching this show today, is that if you click on Cedars there, and if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a button there that says report incorrect data. So let's say I work for Cedars and I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what, we changed our hours, we changed our phone number. They don't have to worry about how do I get in contact, how do I change it. You click on that button, it fires up an email and you can write the changes. That goes to the Center for People in Need and the app updates. A beautiful thing about the app is that once you download it under Wi-Fi or cellular service, like if you have Verizon, it's physically on your phone. Many families who are low income, they have a smartphone, but they really bought it from their cousin secondhand for $10. It's not actually connected to Wi-Fi or a cell tower because they don't pay for minutes.
Right.
Maybe they have prepaid minutes. So by having an app designed like this, they download the app at their child's school, they go back to their apartment where they don't have Wi-Fi or cell service, but everything on the app works. Whenever we have updates, the minute that person comes back under Wi-Fi or cell, it'll auto-update to all the changes that we've made.
Wow, that's really cool. Another thing that I find interesting is the number of partners that were involved in this. Talk a little bit, you talked about Don't Panic Labs, but how did you, why were they involved? They're a private company.
Right.
Why would they want to help you?
Right, so the app's intellectual property is owned by Leadership Lincoln.
Okay.
So I work on this project along with the 9 other members of my team who are accountants and architects and firefighters who we were all part of this community service group. Don't Panic Labs got involved. We reached out to them and we said, hey, would you be willing to help us work on this idea? Purely an idea. We're not software developers. and they turned out that they were looking for a summer project for their high school and summer intern program. So it was a wonderful fit. And so now some of those students who started in high school working on this project 2.5 years ago are now in college and are writing other apps. They're still working on this project. They're working with Don't Panic Labs. So these interns were supervised by project managers at Don't Panic Labs, in addition to Leadership Lincoln staff being involved in that. Also, Cause Collective, which is kind of like our Chamber of Commerce of nonprofits, has also been involved sharing information. The Center for People in Need is really the key component on the nonprofit side because they update all the information. Nothing happens without the Center for People in Need. Community Health Endowment provided us a small amount of money to do marketing. And also our friends at Department of Health and Human Services have been instrumental in sharing their original resource guide, but also sharing their insights on how they successfully gathered this information. The DHHS handbook is really important, the information in there, because that includes all of Lancaster County. The Center for People in Need book was mostly focused on Lincoln.
Okay.
So this way, when we combine those, we really have a county level resource.
Wow. I just, when I first heard about this project, at first I was like, well, why would we need this? But it just seems just so incredible to me. And I know that you told me that one of the biggest users of this kind of service, particularly this emergency thing, is older adults.
Correct.
And so that's pretty helpful that it's all kind of this one-stop shop for, older adults, but just anybody to use. There's a search. We're going to search for Aging Partners because I think they might be, there they are.
Right.
So Aging Partners, which produces this show, is part of this activity. That's
yeah,
really cool.
And that's what's, I think, really exciting about this app is it's applicable for young people looking maybe for summer activities, but it's also applicable for adults and older citizens who are thinking, well, what resources are there out there
Right.
for me?
Right.
And the nice thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you can have it right in front of you. You don't have to get on the phone or anything like that. So if you look at Aging Partners, there's 3 programs that are featured from Aging Partners. You have the cost-free confidential information for services, and you have several others. So when you click on the link there, it takes you to a description of those services. So if you're interested in their programs and services, say the family services piece, you read this information, you're like, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Now you can make the call or
Right.
get on the website.
Right.
So you really have a really good idea of what you're looking for before you make contact with an organization.
Right, that's super helpful. In real life, Brian, you work for the Lincoln Partnership for Economic Development.
That's right.
So does this have any sort of intersection with what you do in real life, with what you do in your volunteer life?
Absolutely. So when you think about the app has a lot of information in there about housing, affordable housing, senior housing, youth, you name it, there's information in there. And in my world, thinking about workforce development, housing is where the jobs sleep. If we don't have adequate housing for families, they can't get to work and be successful the next day. If mom has 3 kids at home and her kids aren't getting fed, how can we expect her to be successful in the workplace and contribute to the economic development of our community? So when I think about MyLink, I think it holds up half the sky. Half the sky is the resources in our community for families to access, and half the sky is her income from working and growing her career. So by having both of those integrated on the workforce side and on the MyLink side, we're really able to help families access resources that already exist. A great example is Bryan Health. Bryan Health printed kind of like a little info card, a brochure, for all the people who come into the ER and are expressing a need for services. Bryan Health is handing them that card saying, download this app. It has all the information that you need. We'll take care of your medical needs, but services needs, it's all right here.
Right.
So it's a really powerful community service for agencies and organizations to share about what's already here.
Right. And I was also in Leadership Lincoln. I was in a class 10, so we were, an early best class ever.
Sure.
But it's great that Leadership Lincoln has had such an impact through this and through all the things that they do. So, Brian, thank you so much
Thank you.
for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I hope that people will explore MyLink. You can find it at your little app store that you
On
use.
Android or Apple?
On Android or Apple, and just download it. It's pretty seamless. Even I figured it out. And I like to remind my audience that it's never too late to live and learn.
Vulnerable and senior adults might be living in silent fear of elder abuse and financial exploitation. We can do something about it. The Nebraska DHHS recommends that communities maintain and improve resources such as public transportation and senior centers to prevent social isolation. Engage professionals in various disciplines to find solutions to end elder abuse. Every year, June 15 is observed as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, an opportunity to ensure justice for all.
It is my pleasure to introduce the professor who designed and taught the very first semester-long Titanic class in the world at Lincoln's very own Nebraska Wesleyan University. Titanic educator and author, Cheryl Rinkle. Cheryl, I'm so glad you're on Live and Learn today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here.
This is going to be a lot of fun. I would like to begin with your book. It is entitled Titanic Today, A Modern View of Titanic's Historic Ports. You approached this very famous story in an unusual manner because you took the readers from the very beginning of the ship's construction through the voyage and on to New York, which was actually the original final destination. Why did you think it was so important to stretch this story on either ends of the very famous sinking?
As a teacher, context is always important. And in telling the Titanic story, I needed a publication that actually addressed the full context of Titanic. And when I was teaching 12 different Titanic courses, there was not one publication that actually had the full Titanic story beyond the ship's maiden voyage. So I wanted to put it into context, and so many of my students, which ranged from age 5 all the way to 95, were asking, what do the sites look like today? And that's what prompted me to put my book together and to actually then extend that story. Because I actually start the book in Liverpool, which was the home office of the White Star Line, which again, White Star Line owned the Titanic. So going there is the very, very beginning of kind of the original story. Plus in Liverpool, and today when you visit it, you can see today the Cunard version, which was the rival of the White Star Line. So it adds yet another talking point into the Titanic story. So then I extended it to Belfast, Northern Ireland. And Belfast is the home of Harland and Wolff shipyards, which built the Titanic. So it has a very large footprint there. And then I continued on to each of the port cities. So Southampton, which is where Titanic left from on April 10th, 1912, on to Cherbourg, France, where some mostly first class passengers boarded. On to then Cove or Queenstown, Ireland, which was only there for a few hours, while it again took on a few more passengers. And then onward to New York to its final destination. We know that unfortunately, Titanic did not sail to its final destination. So in the book, I included Halifax, Nova Scotia, because that is where 150 of the Titanic victims are buried across 3 of the grave sites in cemeteries. And then also, I tried to include some places that people could visit across the U.S. that are exhibits and other places that pay tribute to
What a wonderful
the
idea.
Titanic.
And the photos in the book are yours, right?
They are.
Congratulations.
Yes,
They're beautiful. They're just wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Cheryl, why do you think people continue to be fascinated with the story of the Titanic that happened over 100 years ago at this point?
Well, Titanic's maiden voyage was 1912, and I think also her short-lived. She set sail on April 10th and sunk in the early morning hours of April 15th. And 1,512 souls approximately lost their lives in the disaster. And because of that, it reaches an international audience. It hit all nationalities across all classes of people. And so that fascination was originally there just hours after the sinking, when people were trying to figure out what was actually happening. They were wanting news, and there were conflicting pieces of information. Just as when you study Titanic, you will see that often when you find an answer, it actually creates more questions because it's conflicting pieces of information. And as far as the fascination, I also think that there is that human universal experience. We're never going to know what happened during those final 2.5 hours on Titanic. The last Titanic survivor has already passed, which means that we are now looking to books and descendants of the survivors, and being able to not know, I think, causes people to think about what if. What if I was on board? So that human universal connection of what if and what really happened, and trying to piece it all together to find out.
Yeah, it will be an eternal mystery for sure.
Yes.
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 During your travels, you have discovered thousands of sites that pay tribute to the Titanic. Where have been some of the more unusual places that have surprised you?
Well, my favorite that was most surprising to me was actually in the Bahamas.
Oh.
My husband and I had taken a vacation, and he was saying we are not going to a Titanic destination. And so just for fun, I looked up, and there was an ocean exploration center that happened to have a traveling, very small Titanic exhibit that focused on the wreck site and a little bit more of the ocean conservation side of what was happening to some of the artifacts below. So the Bahamas was the most surprising to me. However, in just walking around, there have been times I've been walking in New York in a side street, and there will be a restaurant that has a model of the Titanic out of toothpicks. There's also in walking and visiting schools, different school children that have built models, and just walking around, small plaques and tributes that were to the many passengers. So many churches have tributes, and locally here in Omaha, at the Durham Museum, they often have a Titanic tribute because Emil Brandeis was on board from the Brandeis department store, and they have his pocket watch, which they sometimes display.
Oh my
so
goodness.
you never know where Titanic
You're
is
always
going to
tempted
pop
to
up.
look, no matter where you are.
Most definitely, most definitely, yes.
Well, I know you travel to Belfast, Ireland, maybe 4 times a year, which is amazing to me right there. Please tell us how Belfast commemorates this historic ship and its story.
Belfast holds a very special place in my heart because as a Titanic researcher, Titanic had the longest footprint in Belfast. They started construction at the Harland and Wolff shipyards in Belfast in 1909, and she set sail from there to go to her maiden port of Southampton in 1912. So for 3 years, the Titanic was being constructed and built and was part of the Belfast skyline. So there's a big, large footprint, and the people of Belfast are very keen to tell Titanic's story and to tell the story of the shipyard workers of Harland and Wolff. And because of that, there have been numerous Titanic commemorations that happen every year in Belfast. And it happens, of course, over April 14th and 15th. So Titanic Belfast is the world's leading tourist attraction of 2016.
Really?
It has 9 galleries, and it brings people through from local, what happened in Belfast, to the construction, to many different aspects of the Titanic. But they hold a commemoration on April 14th. It was their 7th annual this past 2019, this past April. And they have actors that portray some of the individual stories of the actual people. And it changes every year which stories they highlight. And at 11:15, we all come together and have a moment of silence in a commemoration. And then we go out on the slipway where Titanic was built. And that is a very, very special place because that is where the Titanic legend really all began. And they have a candlelight ceremony, and there are names etched in glass of all the victims of first, second, and third class passengers and crew. And it is. And it is one of the most meaningful times and places because you're right there where it all began. And then also Belfast has a commemoration on April 15th at noon at City Hall. The Belfast Titanic Society in the city of Belfast, in the Titanic Memorial Garden, has a service, a commemoration, and again, they pay tribute to all those that lost their lives. So every year,
I can see why you go
2
back.
commemorations.
That makes a lot of sense now. I understand. Well, you even took part in a Titanic Memorial Cruise that sailed in 2012. Tell us a little bit about that. That sounds fascinating.
Yes, that actually was the first time that I took my passion into researching and putting it together for the Nebraska Wesleyan Titanic class. The Wesleyan Titanic class was in fall of 2012, and the 100th year centenary memorial cruise was April of 2012. So I, along with my Aunt Pam, Pam Brayman, went on the Azamara journey, and it was a ship that traced from New York to Halifax to the wreck site. And we met another ship called the Balmoral that actually traced Titanic's maiden voyage route, starting in Southampton. That voyage sold out 3 years in advance.
Really?
Whereas the Azamara, both my aunt and I were able to go on, and there were historians giving lectures, 2 a day. They had recreated the meals, the music, so you were able to really feel what it was like to be on board. And then one of the most meaningful parts was on April 14th, at 11:40, when Titanic struck the iceberg 100 years later, they started a very meaningful commemoration. Names were read of each of the over 1,500 passengers that lost their lives, and then they did a musical tribute out on deck. And when you looked across, the other ship, the Balmoral, was a little ways in the distance, and in between, reflecting on the water, was down below, 2.5 miles below, would be the actual wreck site of Titanic.
Really?
So it was a very, very meaningful memorial cruise.
I can't imagine. I'm so glad that you were able to take part in that.
Yes,
Perfect.
it's one of it's
perfect.
It really was an unforgettable experience.
Well, how did you originally become interested in this subject? Were you quite young, and this just kind of took you over?
This is thanks to my grandmother, Ellis Rupp. She was a one-room schoolhouse teacher, and she had a book that was published nearly just weeks after the sinking, called The Sinking of the Titanic and Other Great Sea Disasters. And I was fascinated by that book at the age of 5. She read those from that book to me, and I had so many questions, and she helped me research those questions. And then in 1985, when the ship was discovered by Dr. Ballard, that regenerated it into many classrooms. So at the time, in the classrooms, now my teachers were bringing it in, and of course every research project I would sign up to research and study something else about Titanic. And it's been a lifelong passion, because the more questions I had, the more I researched, the more answers I found, the more conflicting information, and it just has kept going.
And it's all a tribute to your grandmother and your family.
Yes, and I'm so happy. I'm so happy that I get to do that for my students as well. That I want to instill in them a passion for researching and for the Titanic.
I'm certain that you do, Cheryl. I have to ask you. I'm sure they're asked this all the time. Is the James Cameron film version factually accurate?
It is they took great lengths to employ historians to make it as accurate as possible. It is one of the first movies, because it was after 1985, when they realized the ship had sunk in 2 pieces, that they show the sinking, that the ship breaks apart between the 3rd and the 4th funnel. So it is very factual in the sinking aspect of it. And what I'm very thankful for in terms of the Cameron movie is most of my university students came into the course having seen that movie and really wanting to talk about the movie. But after 16 weeks when they left, they realized that it's a tremendous, important moment in history, and that these were real people with a real event that had lifelong impact. And that was what I hope that I instilled in them by the end.
I'm certain that you have. I'm certain that you have. There have been so many movies made on that subject, but most of us have seen the Cameron one at this point.
Yes,
right?
over 11 different movies.
Well, that's quite a few. That's quite a few. Cheryl, I am so sorry that our time has come to an end, but honestly, your excitement and knowledge on this subject knows no bounds, and I know it will continue to grow. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Cheryl
I'm so
Rinkle.
honored to share it.
Oh,
thank you.
It's been our honor. And to our viewers, I hope you have enjoyed our voyage as well. As you always remember, it's never too late to live and learn.
Hi, I'm Randy Jones with Aging Partners. Did you know that Lincoln expects a 75% increase in the number of seniors living in our community over the next 15 years? Aging Partners is a community service that provides fitness programs to help keep older adults strong and healthy. This year, Lincoln Cares donations are providing funds for new fitness equipment. You can help make this happen. Sign up to support Lincoln Cares and add $1 to your LES bill each month.
Hello and welcome to Live and Learn. I'm your host, Jerry Renault. Today we have a very special treat. We have an incredible place in the city of Lincoln. It's called the Sunken Gardens. And the director or the horticulturist for the city is Steve Nozzle. He is here with us today and he's going to give us a little tour of the Sunken Gardens. I hope it's a place that you visit on a regular basis, but if not, it should be. We're going to give you some places and some things to look at once you get here. Steve, thanks so much for being here.
No
We
problem.
appreciate it. Tell us a little bit about the history of the Sunken Gardens. It has a very interesting history.
Well, it really does. The Depression, as you see behind us, actually was given to the city in 1905 by the Fry family, and it sat here for almost 30 years as a hole in the ground, I guess is what you could call it. It actually was an area where Antelope Creek came in, oxbowed around and exited. And when it was given to the city, they really didn't have a use for it, so the neighborhood just filled it up. It became a dump. And from what I understand of some of the photographs I've seen, they were dumping branches and whatever else down in here. And so in about 1930, during the Depression, Ernest Baer, who was a commissioner for the city of Lincoln, decided he wanted to do something to help the people that were unemployed in the city. So within the city funds itself, it was not WPA money, but within the city funds, he found enough money to hire about 200 men to do different projects in the city, and this was one of them. So the garden was built over the winter of 1930 by, I think they called it a gang of men, probably 15 men, by hand, horse and buggy, in one winter. They put in the ponds, they put in the terraces, sidewalks and everything that was down here and planted it. And so that's kind of the beginning of it. So the whole idea was to give these unemployed men a job. I think they were paid like $4.50 a week. And the newspaper article said that was enough money to pay rent, pay clothes, buy food, you know, like $4.50 wouldn't even buy a loaf of bread today.
Right.
But I mean, it was phenomenal that Lincoln did this before the WPA actually came out. And
Yeah,
so,
and it's really become this incredible place. You came here in 1976, so
yeah.
you have been here 40 some years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how has it sort of changed in that time frame?
It's changed a lot. When I came here in 76, actually I came to the garden to a wedding in 74, found out that they would actually employ people to do gardens, and I thought, oh, yeah, you bet I'm going to do that. Came here in 76, it was in disrepair. The irrigation system was already, well, 40 years old, falling apart, rusting, it was cast iron. A lot of the flower beds had been really not improved over time. In the original, if you've seen the original photographs of the garden, it had 400 and some odd trees in the garden. Most of those were gone. We lost those to the floods that were caused from not having Holmes Lake to hold the waters back. So the garden was just sort of something that the park staff took care of on a level of, well, let's just do the best we can, but really not on what, in my opinion, was an artistic level. And so when I came in, I guess the first thing I really wanted to do more than anything was just bring it back to life. And that took a little bit of discovery. What was the intent of the garden? What do the citizens like? What do they not like? And what would government allow me to do?
And
so
you really think of this as art, right? I mean,
yeah,
it's
it is garden art. Absolutely. Sure, I have a science degree, a couple of degrees, and most of my staff have science degrees, but it's the artistic end of it that's important. When I hire people, it's most important that they know how to play music or they have played music, because it goes hand in hand, and they have to have a good eye for color, art, form, and shape. Right. And then as they then understand what I'm talking about when I say we're going to go down here, we're going to create something. This is what we're going to do.
Fabulous.
And I look for people that can do that.
All right, let's take a little tour, shall
Sure.
we? Let's just let's walk this way.
All right.
Okay, so one of the first things that people are likely to see when they come to the Sunken Gardens is our little gazebo here, and it's got some historical facts, it's got a little bit of history, it's got some photos. This is I just find this to be a nice relaxing place.
Oh yeah, it's you see kids laying on the ground when they come in here and staring straight up at the panels. There's 200 and some odd panels up there. Each one is different, and it depicts, if you look at the panels, different historic landmarks throughout the city, such as the churches and the state capitol, etc. But it also depicts 4 seasons in the year. You see the trees having leaves and not having leaves. Then you see the raccoon family, winter, and etc. And it's fascinating for little kids to come and just talk about it. You see them pointing at different things they find in it. It's kind of cool.
Yes, it is. It's a very cool place, and it's a great starting point. Let's take a little walk down the path here, and we'll talk about some other things.
Sure.
Okay, this section here, I don't remember seeing anything like this before, and when I was here just sort of walking through, I was just fascinated by this, with this little pattern here. Tell me about what this is all about.
Well, the theme this year is Moon River, and so what we did in the garden is we put moons all over the place with ripples of the river. I was driving home from Columbus one day where I grew up, and I saw the moon shining on the Platte River, and I called Ellis probably the next morning and said, I got it, I think I got it. And this is to depict the moon, which is in the center there with the bananas and the zinnias around it. And these are just ripples in the water. So these silver Dusty Millers are, the silver reflection. Of course, the peppers are the dark. And that's what this is all about.
Wonderful. We should probably talk a little bit about Alice. She's a big part of this one.
Alice is a huge part of this. She's my design partner, and she is the head senior gardener in the city. She's worked here for over 30 years. She has an eye for color, and so it's kind of hard to explain. If you've ever stared into a Monet or a Van Gogh brush stroke, you got to get close to the painting, not set the alarm off when you do it. You'll see there's multiple colors in there. That's what Alice does with this garden. That's her job, is to create that brush stroke of color using living plant material. And then we work together to get it on paper, to get it ordered, make sure it's the right plant that will live in this garden. And that's kind of how she's involved with it. She's a good artist. She's a very good horticulturist. And she also grows the majority of this plant material in our greenhouses, at least half of it, during the wintertime. All the bananas and cannas and all that. That's her job.
I was going to say, how much of this have to be replanted every year?
Well, the entire bottom of the Sunken Gardens is an annual flower garden, so we replace the whole thing. We redo it every year. And so it's like it's a new painting. It's like writing music. You never write the same song twice. So every year it's a different pattern. And it's also being a good farmer. You don't want to put the same plant in the same spot every year. That's kind of what that's all about.
Fabulous. Let's walk down to the ponds. I think
Sure.
the ponds are another interesting part of the Sunken Gardens. Let's talk about the ponds. The ponds are always one of my favorite things to do. I just love to see the fish, and I love to look at all of the foliage around it. Tell me a little bit about the ponds. I think they've been here a while.
Well, there have always been ponds in Sunken Gardens since the inception, but these ponds are living ponds, and that means the fish, the plants, and everything stay in them year round. And so the water lilies you're looking at right now around us, they're hardy to the Nebraska weather, and the fish are also hardy. So when it gets colder, they can adapt to the temperature change in the water, and in the wintertime they do remain in the pond. They just go all the way down to the bottom and just barely move. They're still alive, but they just maybe 6 to 7 times a minute they'll pass water over their gills. But the ponds are, what's unique about the ponds is there's always life in them. The reason we have koi in there is because the koi are always moving, and it brings movement to the garden. So a garden has to have not only plants that sway in the wind, but you want other things moving in it also, and that's part of the attraction. Of course, these fish they beg better than a dog. They're up and they're sucking water like they're starving, and they're not. They're just, they know how to communicate to humans. They just, and most people fall for it. They're going, they're starving. It's like, no, they're fine.
Yeah, I like the sign, do not feed the fish, but I suppose that isn't stopping anybody. I'm fascinated by the fact that they can stay in here all winter long. Does the pump stop? Does the water freeze?
The aerators stay on all year long and keep an air hole open. We don't heat the water. Well, the only thing we want to do is make sure that there's an air hole. but that's about it. We'll get ice maybe 3 to 4 inches thick on it, and then everything below that is just cold water. And they can live in that. They can adapt
What
to
kind of
that.
fish are these?
These are koi.
Okay.
And there are some, well, fish that have brought in, when birds land in here, they have eggs on their legs and they deposit the eggs and they get in there. Sometimes we'll have perch and bluegill and stuff like that. For the most part, we try to keep koi in here because koi are always moving. They're very active. They're a little aggressive with each other. And as you can see, there's nonstop movement. They can hear us. They know we're standing here, and they're at, probably wondering if they're going to get something from us.
Well, they keep moving towards us a little bit, so.
Yeah, they're looking at us, but.
Interesting. Well, we've got nothing, sorry.
Yeah, no. I know they're going to be disappointed, but, and the kids love them.
Oh, yeah. Well, I love them. I think it's a great place. I never do not stop by here anytime I come in.
And they're ageless. I don't know how old they are. I have a pond at home. Most of my fish in my pond are somewhere between 20 and 30 years old.
Wow.
I don't know how long they live. I mean, it's hard to say. And so like the big ones you see at the zoo, who knows how long those have been alive. Been around a while.
Cool. All right, let's keep moving on. Let's talk a little bit about these bricks. You see lots of names on the bricks. It's kind of a nice way in some fashion in a memorial for people who have liked the parks. It's a nice way also to contribute money to help out the parks.
Absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the bricks.
Well, the bricks program all came in about the same time as the garden. It was just another idea to help fundraise for the garden itself. And as a result, the brick popularity has taken off. As you walk through the garden, yes, it may have your name or my name, but some of them have sayings, epitaphs, whatever. And it's kind of, you see people just staring at them going, I wonder what this is about. Every now and then we'll find one that you have to think through a little bit. I'm sure there's reasoning behind a lot of them, but they're really kind of fun, and it's a good way to support the garden itself.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and it's sort of an interesting walk through history in some fashion.
And you see people with their head down reading every one of them.
Right.
It's just like.
Yeah, and it's kind of fun because they're both ways. So you've got to walk it both ways if you're gonna read all the names.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are gardens around the country I've been into that do similar things. Same thing. Just people that really love the gardens that they're at, and they want to do something for them. And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful.
I do too.
All right, before we run out of time, there's at least a couple more places that I'd like us to stop. So let's walk over this way.
Okay.
One of the fascinating things for me here is the waterfalls.
Oh, yeah.
And give me just a little brief history of how the waterfalls came to be, because there was an original waterfall, right?
There have been a series of waterfalls. There's been 2 of them here. The first one was made out of stone, and it had 2 sides of water falling on it. On this one, the depiction is there's a fast side and a slow side. And I don't exactly remember what the reasoning for that is, but the idea of crashing water is soothing if you think about it. So a lot of people just come up here and sit on the steps and sort of get entranced into the moment, and so it's kind of fun to watch it happen.
And there's also a statue up at the top. This is Rebecca of the Well. Give me a shortened version of the story of Rebecca. I think it's fascinating.
There's always been a Rebecca in the garden. The original one was destroyed, and this is the replacement. A gentleman out of Grand Island, Joe Young, put this together for us and somehow donated either his time or the statue to the city of Lincoln and made it out of bronze. And the beauty of bronze is it cannot be destroyed. It can be repaired regardless of what happens to it. And so that's how we ended up with Rebecca.
Very good. So Rebecca will be here a while.
She'll be here a while.
Very good. All right, one more place before we end. Our last stop, and maybe my favorite place here in the Sunken Gardens, is the Healing Garden, and it's all in white. I just find it to be so mellow and so relaxing, and it's just a nice place to come up and just sit sometimes. Tell me a little bit about how this all came about.
Well, I guess the whole concept happened one night about midnight. I was walking around up here just designing, and I noticed these flowers just sort of dancing in the wind that were white, and the moon was reflecting through them. And I called my design partner Alice Reed up, and I said, Alice, I said, you can't believe what I saw up here. And of course we started talking about healing gardens and white gardens, and that idea took hold. We started designing everything up here white, and then when we rebuilt the garden, then it became a full healing garden. And it really seems to work that way. You find people up here all times of day and night just sitting back and reflecting. It's kind of, I know it's noisy with Capitol Parkway on one side and 27th Street, but this creates visual silence. You don't hear the cars. I mean, I know they're there right now, but I don't hear them.
Right.
All of a sudden it's quiet. And so, so we created a place of just, I guess, for healing the soul.
It's fabulous. The whole Sunken Gardens is fabulous.
Well,
thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you.
For everything that you do for making this happen and for the tour today. Thank all of you for joining us today. I hope you get a chance to come out to the Sunken Gardens. I'm Jerry Renaud, and don't forget, it's never too late to live and learn.
I'm Lynn Johnson, Director of Lincoln Parks and Recreation. Now that emerald ash borer has been identified in Lincoln, and if you love your ash street tree, you may wish to consider having it treated. Lincoln Parks and Recreation launched its new Adopt an Ash program as of May 1st. Once an ash is infested with the beetle, it dies and becomes brittle, making it unsafe. If you love your ash street tree, Lincoln Parks and Recreation invites you to help protect our community's urban forest and all of its benefits.
Welcome to Live and Learn. Grief is a part of the human experience. Sharing our grief allows us to ease that burden. And it helps the process if we have a friend or a family member that we can filter that individual grief through. My guest today is Sharon Duffy. She's a holistic nurse and wellness coach at McDonough Proactive, and welcome.
Thank you, Doug. I'm glad to be here.
And let's start off with, it's a difficult situation, but let's start off with a positive thing or two. When you first meet with someone that's undergoing grief, what are the first couple things that you relate to them or share with them?
That's a good question. And, you know, I meet them in all different situations. For 25 years, I've worked with people who have experienced the death of a newborn. So I met them in the hospital yet. But now I meet them wherever I meet them. And the first thing I say is to remember to take care of themselves and to know that they aren't going crazy, that this is just grief.
As we, as we work with people, from the perspective of family or friends, are there some things that we should be sensitive to or observe the grief that they're going through?
I think as we talk today and we look at the different stages of grief, it'll make a big difference of how you respond as a friend or family member. And the main thing is just meet them where they are and don't judge them.
You've looked at some different models of the process, and the one that you've used quite a bit, it has 4 stages. Tell us about those 4 stages.
Okay, the grief model theory that I chose was by Glenn Davidson. And the very first one that we've ever heard about was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And those are still valid stages. But Dr. Davidson has an approach that I really enjoyed. So we'll go ahead here and look at the first stage, and I'll talk about some of those symptoms that we see. So the 4 of them are shock and numbness, yearning and searching, disorganization and despair, reorganization and recovery. And remember, they're just words and they're a guideline, but there's no clean-cut way to get through grief. And not one stage doesn't begin and then end and the next one start. It's a gradual process, and grief is each person's individual experience.
So the first stage sounds rather, I'm going to say awesome, but I mean it's traumatic.
Yeah, and it's going to be. Short attention span is one of the things that we see. They can't remember what they ate for breakfast. They don't remember to eat breakfast. I remember I worked with a family who lost a daughter at Christmas time, and they forgot to pay taxes. I mean, in April yet, that was still, they forgot that that's what they had to do.
So it's just forgetting things that are in the normal course of your life.
Yeah, it can be. And concentration is difficult. Decision making is impaired. When a person is going through grief, they're definitely in a stage of depression of some type. It may be a depressed mood, not a clinical depression, but it's hard to make a decision.
So the next stage is searching and disorientation. Is there a difference here? Now, you mentioned previously that it's not cut and dried from one to another. It's a process, but
right.
What's the difference here?
Well, you know, they don't like to be around a lot of people usually. They're sensitive to stimuli. They're better off sometimes just being by themselves. And I do a lot of meditation with them and relaxation methods, because we'll talk later that there's times that they have sleep problems, and when we're deprived of sleep, then we don't function well.
Now, if we get to the final stage, reorganization, it sounds like reestablishing your life. Is that sort of what's happening?
Well, you know, it's kind of, there's not, yes, it is. When we think about healing or recovery, you don't really get over grief, you learn to live with it. And so if you think about people being in a rowboat, let's say, and there's 5 people, and everyone has a thing to do, and one of them jumps out, everybody else gets disorganized too and gets disgruntled. So they each have to find what their role is now with that loved one not in their presence. And so, you know, we're kind of going a little bit different in stages here, but this disorganization and despair, sometimes you think, will I ever feel good again? But you will. And the main thing is to let go with love and know that you will always carry them in your heart. Because we say with a baby, a moment in our lives, but forever in our hearts.
You've used the term emotionally relocating the deceased and moving on with life. Now, the moving on part, I understand. What's the emotionally relocating? How
you
does that
know,
work?
I had a mom that lost her daughter the day before graduation, and she says, I know that, let's call her Susie, is still with me, but she's not here in skin. And I think it's realizing the presence of the one that they lost and knowing that they can connect with them through their spiritual thoughts and remembering them. And many people, like especially with the loss of children, will give gifts to schools and to other organizations in their memory. And that's kind of keeping their memory alive.
Okay. I've had some direct experience with this grieving process as my wife passed away a little over a year ago. And one thing that I have done is try to remind myself that life does go on. And is that sort of the right approach?
It's definitely a good one. You know, we talk about, like I said, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross talked about shock, denial, all the things that denial jumps up a lot. But when we talk about hope, when we think life has to go on, and that's a truth, that isn't a denial. And you would say, what would Mom like for me to do? What would my mom have to say? My mom died many years ago, and I still live in her memory.
So, yes, it's living on with that memory.
And the lessons that they taught you. what you learn from them.
Are there rituals involved here that maybe are involved with this memory of
There
that
are.
loved one?
And the groups that I do primarily now are for the loss of children. So we have, in August, we have a butterfly release where we release live butterflies because there's an old Indian legend that butterflies are messengers to heaven. So we release butterflies and they send a prayer to their child. Then we have a Walk to Remember in October for Pregnancy and Infant Loss Month. And we do a candle lighting in December. So individuals can have those same types of memory rituals.
You used the word hope, and it's interesting. I had a college friend that changed his careers and became a pastor, and that was the key word that he left with me was hope. And you have a poem actually that you'd like to read.
I would. This poem was given to me. A friend bought it, and it was on a coffee mug. And 30 years ago, because I've been doing grief work for 37 years. And this will be on the website, but this is a good description of hope. Hope is not pretending that troubles don't exist. It is the trust that they will not last forever, that hurts will be healed and difficulties overcome. It is faith that a source of strength and renewal lies within to lead us through the dark to the sunshine.
Very good.
And I just want to add to that, I wear a lot of butterflies.
I noticed
a lot of
that.
people call me the butterfly lady, and butterflies are a symbol of hope.
Right.
And that's because butterflies used to be caterpillars. And they just crawled around and ate under the leaves and stuff, and then they went through this experience. They were in that cocoon. So what I tell people is remember in the light what you learned in the cocoon.
Interesting. It's been very informative and uplifting, Sharon. But before we end our discussion, tell us a little bit about your role at Madonna Proactive and your availability to work with people. You mentioned that you do, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have worked there as of tomorrow, 26 years at Madonna, and I am the wellness and holistic nurse. And I got my master's back in '86 in wellness. So that's what I do. I am a wellness coach. I do health risk assessments. And during that time, when people are struggling, grief is one of the issues that I definitely visit with them about. But if you'd like to just talk to me individually, you can email me or phone call me at Madonna, and we can set up a time to have that visit.
So that this is an open invitation for anybody that's going through grief?
You know, at least to have a visit. If I feel that it's something that needs more counseling and long-term counseling, I have a lot of resources that I can share with them and people that I can tell them about that they can visit with on a long-term basis, or groups available.
So it goes back to where we started. Key things here are, reaching out if you are in a situation, that asking for help and looking forward to tomorrow.
Yes, and one thing, because I do my grief work, I incorporate it at work at Madonna, but my primary role is independently. So if people need a speaker for a group on the topic of grief, I'm willing to discuss that with them.
Thank you very much, Sharon. It's very, very helpful for us. Remember, it's never too late to live and learn, especially when you're coping with grief and looking forward to tomorrow.